One of the wonderful things about going to the Lord's Word and reading some of these familiar stories that we have, like Christmas and Easter, is that we're led to see different things each time. And I'd like to take you through some of the things I noticed this year in reading the Easter story, because what comes out each time is a slightly different emphasis, something that is worthy of consideration. So the first thing I noticed in reading this account from the Gospel of Luke is the first thing said, when early in the morning. And you heard some teachings this morning about the beautiful correspondence of springtime, the morning. And that's the leading thought or the leading idea for everything else that follows. Because there's a lot of sadness. It begins with a lot of sadness. There's weeping. We began church this morning with that quote from the Psalms. Weeping may endure for a night, but joy comes in the morning. And there had been a lot of weeping. If we think about what had come before Easter Sunday, think about how the Lord had been taken and arrested, put on trial, and put to death, crucified. And so on the Saturday, which would have been yesterday in terms of us thinking about the sequence of Easter week, there was a lot of sadness. People just didn't know what to do. But here's the setting. It's a garden, and it's morning. It's very early. And we think of the morning as a new opportunity, new beginnings. And that's the reigning idea, the reigning thought here as we go through this story. New opportunities. It's a beautiful thing, the morning. So they come to the tomb, and they notice that the stone's rolled away. And so they know, the women who, they're identified later on, these women come to the tomb, they see that the stone has been rolled away, so they go inside the tomb. And what do they see? Two men in shining bright garments. And so that's a giveaway that these are angels. And here are these two angels with shining garments who say to the women who've come into the tomb, who are you looking for? Why do you look for the living among the dead? And they say that the Lord's risen. And then the angels say to the women, don't you remember how the Lord said to you in Galilee that he would be arrested, put on trial and crucified and rise on the third day? And it says, and they remembered. But we need to ask ourselves the question, how could they have forgotten such an important detail? How could they have forgotten that the Lord had said that? And he had actually said it many times, that he was going to be put on trial and crucified and then rise on the third day. We'll come back to that in a moment. So they leave the tomb, and now they're happy because the angels have told them that the Lord has indeed risen, as he said, and that very shortly they will get to see him, which is very exciting. But they go and tell the disciples, and the disciples think that they're making up a story. They don't believe. They need reminding. And it says that they did not believe the women. They did not believe that the Lord had risen. This is the nature of evil. When it grips us, we forget important things that the Lord tells us in his word. And you can think of going into that dark tomb, and that's what the women were thinking, that the Lord was gone. Even though they knew deep down inside what he had told them. We live in a world where sometimes we have things going on around us, and there are things that are disturbing and upsetting and unfair and unjust in the world stage. A lot of things happening, and that fear grips us, and we start to think that maybe evil is stronger than good. And one of the powerful messages of Easter is that the Lord triumphs over evil. The Lord triumphs, he wins over evil, and he can win over the evil that we see around us and in us too. That's the message. He can rise above it, and he can help us rise above it. But here's the amazing and wonderful thing in this story. The women, as soon as they saw these men and were bathed in the shining bright light of the garments of the two angels, as soon as they were bathed in the Lord's light, they remembered. And that's the beauty of what happens when we go back to the Lord's Word, to remind ourselves about how the Lord really can win our battles. He really can triumph in the fights that we have, in the struggles that we have. To be bathed in the light that the women were bathed in is to go to the Lord over and over again in His Word and let that light, the light of heaven, bathe us, bathe our mind, open our mind. So this is one of the beautiful things the disciples later on came to see when the risen Lord appeared to them. We can imagine Him in a shining garment because their spiritual eyes had been opened and they would see this brilliance. It's very reminiscent of Christmas time with the angels and the heavenly host and this bright light that the shepherds were surrounded by. Again, there's this bright light, being bathed in the Lord's light and being able to suddenly remember, oh, that's right, the Lord did say that in His Word. This will happen. There will be a happy ending. And this is why we love Easter so much, is because it has such a happy ending. There's so many beautiful things about this Easter story, and we've just touched on a few of them. But as time went by, the disciples and the women came to be reminded of the things that the Lord had said, and everything that the Lord had predicted, everything that the Lord had said came true. And all they needed was to be reminded by those angels, and then reminded by the Lord Himself. So this Easter, I wish you all a wonderful time with your families, and may there be a little bit of that peace, a little bit of that joy with the celebration of our risen Lord. Amen.